The huge Pacific Ocean. The Earth's largest ocean. The Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean on Earth. It covers over 60 million square miles. This is almost 1/3 of the Earth's surface. The Pacific Ocean is so big that all of the world's land could float on top of it with room to spare. The Pacific Ocean stretches from the Arctic Circle in the north to the Southern Ocean in the south. Asia and Australia form its western borders, and North and South America are its eastern borders. The Pacific holds several seas. Sea is another word for ocean. It can also mean a small part of an ocean. Pacific seas include the Bering Sea, the Sea of Japan, and the South China Sea. More than 20,000 islands dot the Pacific. The people who live on these islands have many different cultures. Climate. In the north, the Pacific Ocean has long, cold winters and short, cool summers. Along the equator, temperatures stay hot all year. This area is called the tropics. In the south, the Pacific has cool winters and mild summers. The water temperatures near the equator is about 81 degrees Fahrenheit. The farther the water is from the equator, the cooler its temperature. The temperatures also drop as the water gets deeper. The water at the bottom of the ocean is just above freezing. The Pacific Ocean has two main currents that move in a circular pattern. A current is like a river within the ocean. The North Pacific Current travels clockwise. The other main current is in the Southern Pacific. It moves counterclockwise. The air above the ocean is always moving too. Ocean winds cause waves. The size of the waves depends on how hard and how long the wind blows. Gentle winds, called trade winds, always blow towards the equator. Winds can also be destructive. Storms called typhoons and hurricanes begin in tropical waters. They have winds that can whirl up to 150 miles per hour. Tides. Pacific waters also move in tides. Tides are caused by the moon's gravity. It is always pulling water towards it. This causes each ocean wave that hits the shore to go a little farther onto land. When water has risen to its highest level, it is said to be at high tide. At this point, the Earth and Moon begin changing position. Now the Moon begins to pull on different waters. The water that was rising begins receding. Water is at low tide when it has receded to its lowest point. Wherever ocean meets land, there are 2 high tides and 2 low tides each day. Ocean resources. The Pacific Ocean is vital to life on Earth. Water from the ocean evaporates into the air. This vapor condenses, then falls to the ground as rain or snow. Plants and animals use some of the precipitation. The rest flows into rivers that run to the sea. Here the cycle begins again. Without clean ocean waters to keep this cycle going, we would have no water. The Pacific Ocean provides us with many other resources as well. Food. Half of all seafood eaten in the world comes from the Pacific. For millions of people, seafood is their main source of protein. In addition, seaweed is an important food in certain countries. It is full of nutrients. Energy. Oil and natural gases also come from the Pacific Ocean. These fuels power automobiles, airplanes, and machinery. They warm homes and schools. Offshore wells must be built to obtain these fuels. An offshore well is a huge platform that stands on legs buried into the ocean floor. Pumps on top of the platform pull oil or gas from below the seafloor. The Pacific may one day be used to create electric power. Power stations in other oceans use the rise and fall of tide to turn generators and make electricity. There may be places in the Pacific where tidal power plants could be built. Other products. Several medicines come from marine life. Blood from the horseshoe crab, for example, is used to help doctors find certain infections. Agar and algin are substances found in seaweed. They are used to improve the texture of various foods and drugs. Services. The ocean is useful in other ways too. Many people depend on it to earn a living. Some catch seafood to sell. Others work in hotels, stores, or restaurants that serve people who visit a Pacific beach to have fun. In addition, the Pacific Ocean is the world's biggest highway. Cargo ships carry food, cars, and hundreds of other products across the ocean. Tankers carry oil over the Pacific. Military vessels travel the Pacific. So do people on vacation and business trips. Research laboratory. Oceanographers are scientists who study the ocean. The Pacific is their laboratory. Some scientists research how the ocean affects the world's climate. Others try to learn how man's use of the ocean impacts the earth. Marine biologists study the plants and animals of the sea. Scientists believe there are ocean resources they have yet to discover. Perhaps there is a sea organism that can cure cancer or AIDS. Indeed, the ocean's unknown resources may be just as valuable as the resources we take from it now. The ocean floor. The bottom of the Pacific Ocean slopes gently as it moves away from the land. This gradual incline is called a continental shelf. All of the Earth's oceans have a continental shelf. The Pacific shelf is about 1 mile and 1½ kilometers long. At this point, the seafloor drops sharply. The Pacific is the deepest ocean on Earth. Its average depth is about 14,000 feet, yet the bottom is not flat. Trenches. Long, deep trenches gouge the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. The deepest is the Mariana Trench. Its lowest point lies 36,200 feet under the sea. This is the deepest point on Earth. It is called Challenger Deep. The weight of the water and the bottom of the Challenger Deep is immense, yet even here there is life. Mountains. There are also mountain ranges on the bottom of the Pacific. Some of the higher peaks break through the ocean's surface. These are islands. One mountain range is part of a larger chain that runs through many oceans. The Pacific portion is called the East Pacific Rise. It plays an important part in the geological theory called plate tectonics. According to plate tectonics, the Earth's crust sits on 30 huge pieces of rock. Each rock is called a plate. The East Pacific Rise runs between two of these plates. Powerful forces inside the Earth are pulling them apart. As they spread, magma from inside the Earth rises and fills the gap. When the magma cools, it becomes rock. This is called seafloor spreading. Scientists estimate that the East Pacific Rise spreads about 5 inches a year. However, the Pacific Ocean is actually getting smaller. As new seafloor forms, old seafloor is pushed into one of the Pacific's deep trenches. This is called subduction. Volcanoes. A volcano is an opening in the Earth's surface where magma erupts. 3/4 of all the Earth's volcanoes are in the Pacific Ocean. Most are along the edge of two plates. This belt of volcanic activity is known as the Ring of Fire. Each time magma erupts and cools, a volcano grows higher. Some volcanoes become so tall they break through the ocean's surface to become a volcanic island. The Hawaiian Islands are volcanic islands. Most are now inactive. Mauna Loa, though still erupts, it is on the island of Hawaii. Earthquakes. Nearly all of the Earth's major earthquakes also occur along the Ring of Fire. These quakes are not often felt on land, but sometimes they set off huge waves called tsunamis. Tsunamis that reach land can be deadly. Volcanoes can also cause tsunamis. In 2011, a powerful undersea earthquake occurred off the coast of Japan. The earthquake set off tsunami waves over 70 feet tall. Over 18,000 people were killed by the event. Nearly 500,000 people lost their homes. Hydrothermal vents. There are also hydrothermal vents on the floor of the Pacific. These are places where hot water from inside the earth shoots through cracks in the ocean floor. The water can be as hot as 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Various forces have been changing the bottom of the Pacific Ocean for millions of years. They will continue to do so for millions to come. An ocean of life. The Pacific Ocean is made up of several ecosystems. An ecosystem is a group of plants and animals that live together and depend on one another to survive. Plankton. Plankton is life that floats with currents. It can be plants or animals. Plant plankton is called photoplankton. Some are so tiny they can only be seen with a microscope. Others, like some seaweeds, can be 205 feet long. Animals that drift on the water are called zooplankton. They can be microscopic or large. Plankton is food for thousands of marine animals. These animals become food for others, who in turn are eaten by larger predators. When uneaten animals die, their bodies sink and become food for the bottom dwellers. Bodies that are not eaten decay into minerals that are carried to the surface by currents. These minerals become food for the plankton. Fish. Thousands of different kinds of fish live in the Pacific. The smallest is the pygmy goby. It is smaller than a person's fingertip. The largest is the 40-foot long whale shark. Most Pacific fish stay close to land. The largest and fastest live in the upper 600 feet of water, yet some fish live below this. There are even fish that live at the bottom of the ocean. Many deep-sea dwellers have large eyes. Some have special organs that glow like lights. Crustaceans, echinoderms, and mollusk. Another group of animals that live in the ocean are crustaceans. Crustaceans have jointed legs and hard shells. Crabs, lobsters, and shrimp are all crustaceans. Another kind of Pacific animal is the echinoderm. Starfish, sand dollars, and sea urchins are echinoderms. Mollusks make up another group of ocean life. The most common mollusks are snails, clams, and octopuses. Whales. The Pacific is also full of whales. The smallest are dolphins and porpoises. These animals are playful and intelligent. The largest is the blue whale. It is also the largest animal on Earth. Blue whales can grow to be 100 feet long. These huge animals live on tiny zooplankton called krill. The Pacific is home to other whales too. Many, such as the gray whale and the humpback whale, stay in the northern waters during the summer and swim south each fall. This movement from place to place is called migration. Sperm whales stay in the warm parts of the Pacific all year. Orcas, or killer whales, like Pacific cool waters. Other mammals. Sea otters like cool waters. They're unique to the northern Pacific. They can stay underwater for 4 minutes while looking for clams, their favorite food. Seals live in the Pacific too. Northern fur seals stay in the water 8 months out of the year. Birds. Several birds also spend much of their lives on the sea. They eat fish and sleep on the water. The albatross, for example, comes to land for only a few weeks each year. Coral. A unique Pacific ecosystem is based on a tiny animal called a polyp. Polyps live in warm waters. These 1-inch animals attach themselves to each other, creating constantly growing communities. Each polyp contains calcium out of the seawater and uses it to build a skeleton. When a polyp dies, its soft body decays, but its skeleton remains. The resulting formation is called coral. Coral structures get bigger as polyps reproduce and die. Coral grows in a variety of shapes and colors. Some look like fans, while others resemble tree branches. Coral can be bright orange, purple, and green. Coral can grow so big it creates an underwater ridge. This is called a coral reef. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest coral reef in the world. It stretches for 1,250 miles along the eastern coast of Australia. Over 100,000 different kinds of plants and animals live around coral reefs. Many of the fish are brightly colored and striped or spotted. The small fish that live around reefs attract meat eaters. Barracudas, moray eels, and sharks are often found around coral reefs. The Pacific Ocean is huge, yet each life in it is important to keep the entire ecosystem in balance. Ocean exploration. The people who first explored the Pacific Ocean came from Southeast Asia. They paddled to islands near their homes over 2,000 years ago. They then ventured to the next island and the next. Scientists believe that by AD 1000, people were living on nearly all the major islands of the Pacific. Their descendants still live on the islands today. European exploration. Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan led the first European expedition to sail across the Pacific. He left Spain in 1519. He traveled across the Atlantic Ocean and around the southern tip of South America. Magellan's expedition proved it was possible to sail around the earth. Another great Pacific explorer was James Cook from England. Cook explored the Pacific from 1768 until 1776. Cook sailed farther south than any explorer before him. He was the first European to visit New Zealand and the Hawaiian Islands. He mapped more than the Pacific Ocean than any explorer before him. Exploring the depths. By the early 1800s, most of the Pacific had been charted. Now scientists wondered what was below the sea. Scientists aboard the British ship Challenger first studied the water and the life of the Pacific in 1874. During the 1930s, sonar helped scientists map the ocean bottoms. Sound waves were shot at the seafloor. Scientists calculated ocean depth by measuring how long it took for the sound to return to the surface. In 1930, scientists invented a craft called a bathysphere. This small steel sphere was attached to a ship by a long steel cable. Two people could sit inside and look out portholes as it was lowered into the sea. In 1960, Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh took a bathysphere into the Mariana Trench. This vehicle was much like the bathysphere, except it could move up and down without a cable. Piccard and Walsh were the first people to go to the bottom of Challenger Deep. Today's underwater craft are called submersibles. Submersibles have space for a crew and sophisticated research instruments. Submersibles are a great scientific tool to help research explore the ocean depths. They are small submarines that can maneuver underwater easier than larger submarines. Submersibles are equipped with viewports, searchlights, and mechanical arms, and cameras and scientific instruments that enable seeing and recording data from underwater vehicles. One of the most famous submersibles is called Alvin. Alvin has made several important discoveries, including finding the first Pacific hydrothermal vents. Today's technology. Submersibles are still used today to study the Pacific. More and more, though, they are not manned. Remotely operated vehicles called ROVs are piloted by people on nearby ships. ROVs are linked to the ship with a cable that carries power and information. ROVs can go deeper than manned submersibles. Oceanographers also use special tags to study the ocean and its life. The tags are attached to capture sea animals that are then released back into the ocean. The tag then transmits information back to the scientist. It tells them where the animal is swimming. It also tells them what the water is like around the animal. All of the research is paying off. In 2006, a coral reef off Thailand was discovered. New animals and plant species are also being found. These discoveries are exciting to scientists. They remind them that there is still much to learn about the Pacific Ocean. A healthy sea. A healthy ocean is important to all of us, yet in many places the Pacific is not well. Changes in the atmosphere. To begin with, the Earth's climate is getting warmer. The warmer air means warmer ocean waters. This warming is changing Pacific ecosystems. It might even lead to the extinction of some species. In addition, there is more carbon dioxide in the air than ever before. This from an increase in the use of fuels like coal and gas. Some of this carbon dioxide is falling into the ocean and making the water more acidic. This is called acidification. Acidification weakens the shells of mussels, snails, and other shellfish. It also makes it hard for corals to develop. Pollution. Another threat to the Pacific is pollution. The Pacific is polluted with chemicals, oil, sewage, and trash. Some of the pollution comes from rivers that flow into the sea. Often pollutants are dumped directly into the ocean. Many pollutants kill life instantly. This damages ecosystems that can take years to repair. Other pollutants are absorbed by animals and can then make them sick. These pollutants stay in the animals and are passed on to animals or people that eat them. They can become sick after eating a poisoned animal. Trash pollution is another problem in the Pacific. A trash pile larger than the state of Texas covers an entire area in the Pacific. Most of the trash is plastic that animals think is food. Turtles, seabirds, and other marine animals die after eating it. Overfishing. Overfishing is another problem in the Pacific. An area is overfished when fish do not reproduce as fast as they are caught. Numerous areas of the Pacific are overfished. This means that there are fewer fish in places where they once thrived. The main cause of overfishing is commercial fishing. Commercial fishing is done by companies that package and sell large amounts of fish. These companies often fish with huge nets or very long fishing lines. These kill many of the animals that swim within them. Yet many of the animals are not even wanted and are thrown back into the sea. These animals are known as bycatch. Each year, thousands of Pacific animals die as bycatch. One particular solution to overfishing is aquaculture. This is a method of raising fish much like farmers raise crops and livestock. Many Asian countries have large aquaculture farms. Depletion. Population and overfishing have led to the depletion of numerous marine animals. A species is depleted when its population becomes very small. Depletion of a species can upset the balance of the entire ecosystem. It can also lead to a species extinction. Endangered species. Some Pacific species are already endangered. This means there are so few of them alive that they may become extinct. Pacific sea lions, sea otters, seals, turtles, and whales are all endangered. It is illegal to harm any animal that is endangered. Marine sanctuaries also protect ocean life. A marine sanctuary is an area of the ocean where animals cannot be disturbed. Several Pacific countries, including the United States, have created these ocean parks. In fact, the largest marine sanctuary in the world was created in 2006. It surrounds some Hawaiian islands. Laws that protect the ocean and its life will help the Pacific Ocean. In time, it could become healthy again. This is vital to us all because healthy Earth depends on a healthy ocean. The huge Pacific Ocean.